Warning, this video may contain spoilers for late parts in the game. If you plan on playing this at some point, turn back now. You have been warned. Hello, CR here with something a little new. This is going to be a bit of a review for Kingdom Hearts 1, and over the next couple of weeks, I'll be doing general reviews of games throughout the series. I will be excluding some that I just don't want to play at all, and maybe one day I'll review them, but for now you won't be seeing reviews for Chain of Memories or Recoded. I'm a little on the fence of even playing Kingdom Hearts 3, as I'm really not interested in replaying that game, but we'll see. My big reasoning for this, as it's not like I'm not trying to say Kingdom Hearts hasn't seen some bad times, but I record all the footage that I put into these videos and don't want to take other people's content. One more thing I want to mention before we really get into it is that, as you can see, I was playing on beginner mode because I had recently played through the game, but like I have said before, I record everything, so to make it easy-ish, I did beginner mode. I did use the Kingdom Key mostly, which I didn't realize was so hard until I got to the end game, which I then decided to start using other Keyblades in order to get through the end bits. With that said, let's finally get into the review. Alright, first off, let me explain the basics of the game. You control Sora in an action-based setting, wherein you have a health bar and an MP bar. Pretty standard stuff. The more magic you use, the more your MP bar goes down. The more damage you take, the more your health bar goes down. You travel through many Disney worlds as well as original worlds in order to seal keyholes, which we'll talk more about later. All character-to-character interaction is done with the triangle button, as well as character to item or doorways. The camera can be manually used, but once you lock onto something, the camera follows what you lock onto, which can turn into a problem and will be talked about further in the video. The main portion of the game is you and two party members who can be switched out with Disney characters depending on the world you're in, fighting through enemies in order to get to the next segment of the story, sometimes interacting with puzzles or platforming your way through the levels. You can also use items in order to heal your health or magic at varying degrees of power, which can be bought or dropped by enemies. Enemies also have the possibility of dropping weapons for Donald and Goofy, equipment or synthesis items which are used for, you guessed it, to synthesize better items, equipment or weapons. And that's really all there is to the main portion of the game. So now let's explain the story. The gist of the story goes like this. Sora is chosen as the Keyblade Master as his friend, Riku, falls to literal darkness, and his other friend, Kairi, disappears into thin air when Sora attempts to save her, as the keyhole to their world is taken over by the Heartless. Let me explain a couple of those things right now. The Keyblade is a weapon of light that can seal the keyholes of a world or open them as need be. The Keyblade is also one of the only weapons that can release the hearts of certain Heartless, as normal weapons only kill the Heartless. A keyhole of the world is the heart of the world. When left open, it can be invaded by the Heartless and destroyed, leading the world to vanish and essentially die. A Heartless is a person whose heart is fully consumed by darkness, which comes in many forms. It literally kills the person as they become nothing more than a mindless monster whose main goal is to seek out other hearts and take them, wanting nothing more than to return to Kingdom Hearts. There is another kind of Heartless, which I'll go into when I start talking about a certain person named Ansem. Alright, with those things explained, Sora wakes up in an alleyway being licked by a dog before he starts to explore the place he's in, which he learns is called Traverse Town. A couple other things he learns after meeting Leon, named Squall in this game, from Final Fantasy VIII, Yuffie, Cid, and Aerith from Final Fantasy VII, is that this town is a place that exists for people who lose their worlds, which Sora then realizes that his world is gone. He also learns a bit more about the Keyblade's true purpose. After getting into a sticky situation, Sora meets Donald and Goofy, who have been looking for the Keyblade wielder, as their king, Mickey Mouse, had informed them that he began to notice many stars going out, which indicated worlds that had been destroyed by the Heartless getting into the keyholes, and he needed to leave to explore the causes of the disturbance. He also told them to help by looking for the Keyblade wielder. Upon finding Sora, they then set on their adamant way to find their king, while all Sora wanted to do was find his two friends, Riku and Kairi. They explore many worlds trying to find even a hint that the king might have stopped by. They go to Wonderland, Olympus, and the deep jungle, which is Tarzan's world, before they find a hint that the king could have been there. A piece of a gummy ship. A gummy ship is basically a spaceship that allows travel between worlds. They go back to Traverse Town in order to ask Leon if he knows what it is, who refers them to Sid, but not before giving them a weird item that he doesn't know how to use. After asking Sid, he tells them that he can install it into their ship, but it might take a while, so he gives them a book to deliver to an old man who turns out to be Merlin, who teaches them some magic, as well as introduces them to the fairy godmother, who had also lost her world to darkness. She sees the item that Leon gave you and realizes that it's actually another being whose world had been lost to darkness, and through sheer willpower survived in the form of the item, as not all people go to Traverse Town, only some lucky few who survive the destruction of their home. Simba is then brought back to life, being able to use his spirit as a summon to help in battles. The book they were delivering also happens to be Winnie the Pooh, and was given to Sid by the king. After leaving Merlin's house, Sora encounters Riku, who had also been looking all over for Sora and Kairi. They have a little fun together as they reunite before Sora saves Riku from a Heartless who was going to attack from behind. This confuses Riku, as he had usually been the stronger of the two back on the island, and he takes Sora's Keyblade, looking it over and seeing the Keyblade had picked him. Sora tries to convince Donald to let Riku adventure with them, but Donald refuses, and during their argument, Riku vanishes. A couple moments later, Leon tells them that a witch named Maleficent is in Traverse Town, and to watch out as she's just as bad as the Heartless, and ask if they could find the keyhole to the town and to seal it. As it turns out, they were right. Maleficent is there trying to manipulate Riku, who she saved, into believing that Sora had forgotten about him and Kairi, that he had made new friends and no longer needed them. None the wiser of this revelation, Sora and the gang go to seal the keyhole, and by the time they're done, Sid had fixed up their ship, and they were ready to keep on looking for the king. The gang then has some shenanigans in Agrabah before being swallowed by the giant whale Monstro in space. Yes. Shortly after showing up, Riku also shows up, leading Pinocchio to follow him further into the depths of Monstro's stomach. Upon finding Pinocchio again, Riku starts to argue if Sora had actually been looking for them at all. After fighting a boss, the gang ends up back with Geppetto, where they entered through the mouth, and they see that Riku had stolen Pinocchio and had proceeded through to a different area. Riku believes that he can steal Pinocchio's heart and give it to Kairi, as Maleficent had found her body for him, obviously to manipulate Riku, but Kairi was more or less comatose. Maleficent stating that while her body lived, her heart was missing. This leads to Sora and the gang to chase Riku and eventually fight another boss to save Pinocchio, as once again Riku vanishes into thin air. The gang adventure to Halloween Town, and then while searching for the next place to go, they are put in the brig of Captain Hook's ship. While there, they find that Kairi and Riku are aboard the ship, which Sora then desperately tries to search for Kairi throughout the ship, only catching a glimpse of her once before learning that Riku and Maleficent had taken her to a place called Hollow Bastion. They fight off Hook and fly to England, closing another keyhole in the process. Stumped on how they will reach Hollow Bastion, they once again head to Traverse Town, thinking that Sid will know how to get them there, which they are right about. Upon finally landing, they jump their way up to a floating platform where they see Riku fighting a beast. Who is the beast from Beauty and the Beast? Riku wounds Beast and Sora jumps in to save him. Riku then reveals that he was the true master of the Keyblade and that Sora had just been holding it for him. He takes it, and with the Keyblade, Donald and Goofy leave the party, as their one goal of following the Keyblade master now lies with Riku, as Sora is no longer able to call the Keyblade back. Beast then backs up Sora a bit as they try to follow where Riku and the gang went. When they eventually meet up, Beast is tricked into following a Heartless that took the form of Belle. Sora is prepared to fight Riku and his former friends when Sora realizes that he no longer needs the Keyblade and that his friends are his power, as Goofy and Donald betray their king's orders and help Sora. As he says these words, the Keyblade finally chooses Sora as the rightful Keyblade Master, and Riku uses his new powers of darkness that Maleficent had given him. Eventually, Sora defeats Riku, who disappears once more, and the gang continue their way up through the labyrinthian castle. Behind the scenes, Riku meets with a mysterious robed figure who we saw talking to Sora at the beginning of the game, who tells Riku to give in to the darkness, which he does. Eventually, the boys reach the chapel of the castle where they fight Maleficent, who they defeat quite easily. In her dying moments, she runs away, and Riku, who is now under full control of the darkness, appears before her with a Keyblade that has the power to unlock hearts from bodies, which he does to Maleficent, which allows her to take full control of the darkness that had consumed her heart, becoming a giant dragon. The gang fight a hard battle against her before finally defeating the mastermind behind the entire operation. Or so it seems. As the gang reaches the final room in the castle, they discover all the Princesses of Heart that have been captured in the worlds that have fallen to darkness, as well as some of the worlds visited in this game. The Princesses of Heart are Snow White, Alice, Jasmine, Belle, Aurora, Cinderella, and Kairi. Upon going further in the room, Sora encounters Riku, which he realizes instantly is not actually Riku. He reveals himself to be Ansem, the Seeker of Darkness, who had used Riku's body as a vessel to reincarnate himself into. He was the one who had told Maleficent of the possibility to control all the darkness if she were to capture all the Princesses of Heart. The reason for this was to open the final keyhole that would lead to Kingdom Hearts. Upon fighting and defeating the Ansem-possessed Riku, Sora realizes that Kairi's heart had been with him the entire journey, and takes Ansem's Keyblade, using it to unlock his own heart, releasing Kairi's heart as well as the hearts of the princesses that were trapped in the Keyblade. As he does this, Kairi awakens only to see Sora vanish, as unlocking his heart kills him in the process. Doing this as well leads to the opening of the final keyhole, which allows massive amounts of darkness to spill out, with the only thing stopping it being the Princesses of Light staying to fight it back. The real Ansem makes his appearance and begins to walk towards the group, but Riku fights through the darkness in order to help his friends escape one last time. Donald and Goofy begrudgingly take Kairi and begin their escape to the castle. At some point, a Heartless appears and follows the gang on their ascent down. After it gets a bit close, Kairi realizes that this Heartless is actually what Sora had become, and as they get surrounded by Heartless, Kairi reaches out to protect the Heartless Sora, which through her Princess of Heart powers, allows Sora to push his way through the darkness and re-find the light, becoming himself once again. After leaving Hollow Bastion in the hands of the Princess of Light, they head to Traverse Town to talk with the gang and catch their breath. Leon tells them that so much darkness is spilling out of the keyhole that if they don't stop it, all worlds will be overrun by Heartless, so he asks Sid if he can help them go back, and he says if they can find the gummy piece he hid, that'll do it, which they do. Speeding back to Hollow Bastion, they go inside the keyhole and dispatch the Heartless Behemoth and close the keyhole, which opens the end of the world, which is to be assumed from the Princess of Heart, where Ansem got sucked to. Leon, Aerith, Yuffie, and Sid appear in Hollow Bastion, telling Sora that this is their world that originally got swallowed by darkness. Exploring the library, they find some reports that Ansem left, in which he talks about creating Heartless while using regular Heartless he found, dubbing them Emblem Heartless, and mark them to differentiate between the pure-blood Heartless. The gang finally adventure to the end of the world and see that this is where the worlds that were consumed by darkness have went, eventually reaching a startlingly white door in the darkness that takes them to Destiny Island, where they battle Ansem for the final time. As the battle gets near the close, Ansem reveals what he believes is the door to darkness, while Sora believes that with all his heart that it's actually the door to light. The door opens and a bright light shoots out from inside, eviscerating Ansem, the Seeker of Darkness. As Sora goes towards the door, he looks through and sees many Heartless inside, as well as Riku. Donald and Goofy look further, seeing the king, who tells Sora he found the other Keyblade needed to seal the door, and that while Riku and he will be trapped inside, they'll find a way out. Sora, believing this promise, agrees, and both of them seal the door. As Sora looks around, the realm they're in crumbling, he notices Kairi, whose heart found him in the darkness. The piece of land she's on begins to drift away, and Sora promises that no matter where they end up, they'll find each other. Kairi disappears, and Sora, Donald, and Goofy adventure down the road further onward, not knowing where they're going, but believing in the promises they made to their friends. Alright, so let me start with the pros of this game. I like how immersive this game is. There isn't a lot, but the bits there are really nice and add to the enjoyment. From small things like giving items to flowers in Wonderland and getting better items in return, to cooking up experiments in Deep Jungle. It all just adds to the enjoyment of the game as well as making it feel alive. There are also many reasons to come back to the worlds and re-explore later, with abilities that let you jump higher to get to places with more ease, a flying ability that lets you cover long distances, treasures that you couldn't reach before, or Trinity symbols that you can now activate. I really like the gummy ship creator in this game, and even in the original I had a blast just sitting and making stuff for hours. For the purpose of this playthrough I just used a standard one, but it's fun to see how ridiculous you can make the ship. This is one of the first games I played where I felt the stakes of everything, and the story captured me all the way through. One of the games I would play for hours without stopping. While the beginning Destiny Island portions may seem like a slog on subsequent playthroughs, I really like this a lot. It really shows you what the entire game is going to be about in a show not tell manner. Besides the whole stained glass press X to attack nonsense, this is cut into two parts. The first being explore and learn how to fight different kinds of enemies, and the second being the platforming section, where you explore through varying degrees of platforming, which I rather don't like all that much. This tutorial showing and not telling goes a long way in my book. For the cons, the biggest thing that annoyed me was the camera angles. Almost every single door you go through has you looking backwards at the door again on the other side. So when you press the up button, expecting to go forward, you just end up going backward through the door. I've done this time and time again, which I guess you could chalk up to user error and not learning, but it gets annoying when you forget or don't expect to enter like that. Camera angles also get a little wonky when locking on an enemy, especially flying ones, as sometimes they go too fast or get weirdly too high out of sight and out of reach, which is again annoying, but fixed locking onto a grounded enemy or even using a gravity spell, but still. Combat feels a little sluggish at times as well. Like I was saying before, most endgame enemies are zooming all over the place, and they become a nuisance and hard to hit, with most attacks becoming straight whiffs. The combat becomes a chore with those enemies, especially going Kingdom Key only. While I said making gummy ships was fun, as well as making a ridiculously overpowered one is cool, it doesn't make up for the fact that gummy missions themselves are a bore to do, which you can call it a hardware limitation or whatever you want, but the gummy missions are garbage. This is a big one that can be excused for hardware limitations, especially since some of the worlds are small. That's my gripe. Some of the worlds are way too small, and while there are things to do, it still feels just as empty. Maybe the lack of NPCs anywhere other than Traverse Town, although even there it's still kind of empty. I think that the extra things and world interactions make it up a good bit, but still. Another thing is not many interesting enemies or bosses that you have to think outside the box a little for. Almost every enemy is either whack it till it's dead or attack, wait, attack till it's dead. I'm making a favorite bosses video, and my favorite boss ends up going a bit against the mold, so hopefully you stick around for that. There are a lot of extra things to do after you beat the game. I stated previously that re-exploring the worlds is a definite thing you're going to want to do. But if you haven't done them already, the Olympus Coliseum awaits you, with 4 different cups with 3 different ways to do them. Normally, just as Sora, or Time Trial, you'll get a lot of extra time and levels playing through them. There are also 2 special cups you can do that were probably some of the first secret bosses I ever fought against, that being fighting the Ice Titan and fighting Sephiroth, which if you've only fought him in Kingdom Hearts 2, you have another thing coming here. There are 2 more secret bosses from the original version, as well as 1 secret boss added in the final mix version, which none of these bosses are slouches either, that being Kurt Zisa, who was the name of the person who actually won the contest for a boss to get named after them, the Phantom, and the Mysterious Man, who is not so mysterious anymore, but for the sake of a later review, I'll leave him nameless. For lack of wanting to fight hard enemies, there is always the synthesis system, which is rather lagging in this game, but not all that bad to be honest. But it is a grind, so prepare for that. I know I gave a spoiler warning beforehand stating that if you've been thinking of playing this game, churn back now. But if you're like me and like to watch a video about something before you buy it, even learning spoilers that you hope to forget as you're playing, I definitely recommend this game. As the first title for a series, it hits pretty strong. The story throughout the games will keep you going through the series. I haven't even played all the games in the series and I could still understand what was going on during the third game. Although I was heavily disappointed in it, that's a review for another time like I said. Even without knowing if there were going to be any more games when I was a kid, I played this for hours and hours, albeit not well, getting stuck at many points in the game, even on the easiest difficulty. I still had a blast and wouldn't give up the experience for anything. As always, hope you enjoyed and see you next video.